So, guys, I want to review the Hey Arnold episode called Mugged, and I do want to talk about this a little bit before I start. Is that, I like reviewing a lot of different TV shows, and if you guys like Hey Arnold, definitely, hit me up, like and subscribe, and ask for more videos. And, I'm also a very busy person, so definitely I can make a plan to do this. And the other thing too is that as I'm dissecting this episode and talking about it, I'm going to talk about why this was a really great cartoon because I do think that a lot of people say, "Oh well, Byron, you were born in the '80s. You're going to love things from the '90s, and nowadays, you may hate Teen Titans Go or whatever." So like it's always good to kind of explain to you guys, why these old cartoons were a lot better in my opinion, because as my science teacher told me, if you can't explain things, then shut up, really. So, what happens in this episode is that Arnold. It starts with Arnold like going down, getting off the bus, listening to music, bobbing his head, and then he gets roughed up and mugged by by a Cretan who takes his bus pass and his change, and he also gets thrown around a couple of times. So, it's actually good because, obviously it's set in New York City, probably the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, if I'm correct. And, there were a lot of situations where people would get mugged. And also, like back in the 90s, there were latchkey kids. And their kids had a lot of independence back then. So, nowadays, parents will meet their kids at the bus stop. Back in the 90s, you walked your ass home, really, and there was a whooping if you were late, or that be that really. There's a lot more. There was a lot more. Independence. So it's good that it captures the era, but it also is good because it is something that did happen to kids. It was that kids would get mugged or kids would get ambushed by bullies. So I appreciate the realism. I also appreciate another thing about this, which is that you take the main character and you put them in a situation where they're getting roughed up and mugged. And usually a lot of shows would not do that because they would feel that that's too dark or that's too violent or that's too upsetting, or they want to almost have their main characters be like invulnerable. It's just like when you watch a lot of superhero shows that obviously the main character doesn't go down that easy. Type of thing, really. So it was good to kind of give him some vulnerability. That's good character development. He goes to his apartment, and his neighbors are talking about like what happened to him, and they're talking about like what should happen. He should learn self defense, and that was also another thing that happened back then, which is what people that Arnold clearly has some depression, some PTSD, some anger from this, but nobody really thinks about his mental health. Nobody thinks about a police report. People think about teaching him to be the Karate Kid, basically. And I think that there's a level of psychological drama in this episode, but I even think that even the creators don't really assess that episode is a psychological drama about Arnold's mental state. But I also think it also stems from some attitudes back in the 90s or 80s or 70s, which was that if your kid gets roughed up, you teach them to go to the YMCA, learn how to box, you teach them how to learn karate or whatever. And sometimes what happens is that you're responding with violence to violence, and that's kind of like the theme of this episode. And then his grandmother teaches him like karate, and it's a little like inspired by the Karate Kid, and she's trying to be like this philosophical teacher, and it's a little like offensive in some ways because some people may say, okay, this is just maybe she watched a lot of Asian kung fu movies and she's trying to sound like some Asian karate master, because there's a stereotype of Asian people being very philosophical and metaphorical with their words and also enigmatic, so it could read off as a little like offensive or a little yellow face, even though that's not their intention. But she kind of gives him the metaphor of you got to be like the toad. You got to be like the toad in the pond, waiting for the fly to come to you, and he doesn't get what that means. And what happens is that he learns how to do karate very well. He can start breaking boards. He can kick things off people's heads with agility. He can break through cinder blocks. So, what happens is he goes on a power trip. He goes to school, he roughs up some people, and then what happens is that he's coming home from a place, he's by himself, and then he sees a person who asked him where the bus stop is, and the guy comes off as like mentally disabled, just like speech patterns, an adult that's kind of childish, and he does a bunch of karate moves, and what happens is that his clothes get all torn and stuff like that, and he walks away from Arnold, with his underwear exposed and ripped overalls, and people are mad at Arnold. So Arnold's kind of like realizing that he's becoming just like that mugger that attacked him, where he's becoming the bully, he's becoming unstable, and he's becoming a power trip. And then the next thing that happens earlier in the episode is that Arnold does that famous, he talks to a mirror and he says, like, you talking to me? You're talking to me. I see nobody here. So he must be talking to me. I'm the only guy here. You must be talking to me. That's a reference to Taxi Driver. So as I've said, that this is also about how his mental state is breaking apart, really. And I think also people don't really just talk to him and say, you know what, I think that there's some trauma there. And I think that's kind of the thing, really, that, he's learning to stand up for himself. He's learning to respond to things with violence, but he's not learning how to respond to things with seeing a middle ground, with judging a situation before jumping into violence. But then after he assaults this person who was asking him for where the bus stop is, and this guy's walking away crying, all like distraught, and people are criticizing Arnold. Arnold gets on a bus. There's his grandmother, and then he kind of figures out that metaphor of the fly of waiting for the fly to come to the frog in the pond, that you have to wait until trouble comes to you to respond, instead of just always asking for trouble. And he meets the mugger. The mugger takes away his grandmother's purse. He dangles his bus pass that he stole in front of Arnold. Arnold grabs it at like ultrasonic speed. This guy gets freaked out and gives the money back with some interest and gives the purse back, and he runs away screaming. So I didn't like that as an ending, because that's not realistic. Obviously, that's not really realistic. But I understand they were trying to like wrap it up in a way that that they could wrap it up for a kids cartoon. But the message really is about like how to respond with self-defense in ways that are appropriate, and not to have a power trip, but also to how people can be hurt and traumatized by mugging and other situations like that. And unfortunately, sometimes if you're focusing on how they can defend themselves, you're not focusing on how they should defend themselves mentally from what happened. And that happened in a lot of situations. I believe there's an episode of The Simpsons, if I'm correct, where Marge gets mugged. Same idea, where she kind of becomes muscular. She finds the person who mugged her, and she beats the shit, and she goes around assaulting people or forcing Homer into sex and doing other things, but she doesn't learn her lesson. She kind of learns that she's losing herself, but then she goes back to just being, very nice Marge. Where in this episode, Arnold learns that it's not to not defend yourself. It's either be violent or never defend yourself. It's finding the middle ground, which is what we need, because obviously, if not, then we just think that we go to extremes. We go to the Ned Flanders. We allow people to walk all over us, and we just don't respond, and we hold on to our trauma, and we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and that can lead to a personality of somebody who doesn't want to be assertive, or be in relationships where they're taken advantage of, or they harbor onto rage. And I think with Arnold, he learned to harbor onto rage, really. But then you saw him in the episode where he becomes like a bully and whatever, and he could have easily become like that mugger without realizing. He could have gone to his public school and rob kids or rob people in the street and go down a bad path, really. But he chose to find the middle ground. And I also think it's also an interesting thing too, that his grandparents, he's not really punished for his actions, Arnold. Like, he's not punished for scaring people. He's not punished for what he did to that person in the street, ripping off his clothes, with karate moves. He's not really punished for his actions, really. So it is a little controversial, really. But I do kind of think that, obviously he realizes what he did was wrong. So in 11 minutes, they made a very complex psychological drama. They made a story about finding the middle ground when you learn martial arts, And they've also, I think, in a way, kind of found a way to say that sometimes, you know, the people that hurt you, you have to, you have to know how to just make yourself stronger than them, either by, you know, mentally training or physically training and all that, really. You know, so, and also the impact of what happens when we have power trips. Like the Mugger had a power trip. He was bigger and stronger than Arnold. And also, too, you look at how when Arnold was bigger and was stronger mentally and physically than that person who he destroyed that person's clothes, really, you know, of the person who was asking for the bus stop, you know. So I think that it is about, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's definitely a really great episode, very insightful. And if you want to see more Hey Arnold reviews, I just want to see at least over 100 views on this, and then I'll just do more episodes. Like, share, and subscribe.